Coming up in today's podcast.
They are largely BDH's enforcers. Most local administrations will be made up of this age group because they will act under instructions even if their conscience tells them otherwise.
When 1964, I think, John Hales, I worked at, he was about 42. I listened to him taking a reading, and I was just absolutely astounded at the way that John Hales, when he was a 42-year-old, the way he talked to older men. And
like are you saying he was disrespectful? Like he was rude in the way he
really
talked?
Disrespectful to older men. He was only 42. And I relayed this to the press when I was getting visited, and I said he was rude. I said my impression of John Hales was that he was rude. And they actually relayed this to Bruce Hales. And Bruce was really upset about it, that I said his father was rude.
Just on that, it's one of the points in the podcast that boys made was about the dad always fighting for the underdog.
Yeah.
I saw written evidence after I left, and my dad contacted Bruce Hales to say what he should do about the situation and how he felt, he should be taking responsibility for the situation. Bruce Hales' advice to my dad was, when my dad was worried about me,
Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. Explore survivor stories. Uncover the hidden truths. Join our X-Cult conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
This is part 2 of a 3-part series listening to emails and messages from insiders. Make sure to come back for part 3, where we receive a very telling email from an insider regarding their latest PBCC podcast. Plus, we end this 3-part series with a video bound to give you some comedic relief. We pick up where we left off from podcast 147.
I'm not aware of any brethren efforts in the US elections like Canada and Australia. I think the US is far too big and they're insignificant and don't have the same access in the US they do elsewhere. But right now, all those plebes who were violently anti-Trump and pro-Clinton in 2016, lukewarm to Trump in 2020, are now running around wearing MAGA hats, posting Trump stuff, and generally carrying on like cult members, until Bruce tells them that Gavin Newsom is the man that they will switch on a dime. There are even photos recently of some high-ranking PBCC personalities on a tour of New York after Westfield wearing MAGA hats. It looks hilarious. Overweight, fat, pasty-faced guys with red alcohol-flushed cheeks wearing MAGA hats, polo tops, and grin like little kids at a party. Outside of the US, Bruce and the PBCC are always in bed with the conservative parties, never the left-wing ones. I think this is because non-US countries, being smaller than the PBCC, have a lot more personal links and contacts with the people in the conservative parties. This lines up better with their worldview, so they can call in favours and do quid pro quo deals. And all these politicians are venal or ignorant enough to take part willingly. The US is different. The US is held up inside the PBCC as almost next to the heavenly city, and the US president as infallible, thanks to JSH. So regardless of who is in power in the US, Bruce has to make it look like he's actually in charge and has influence with them. So whether a Democrat or a Republican is in charge, he will promoting them while they're in office and making it look like they're taking counsel from him, when in reality, I'll be surprised if they had any deep personal links with either party, unless Jerry Square has opened some doors for them. Because of the size of the US and the fact that they're competing with all of the rest of the world's lobbying dollars, so we're a way, way smaller fish in the pond than they are anywhere outside of the US. Basically, the arrival of Trump in 2015 totally blindsided Bruce, as it did most other boom analysts, and he had to go through the same grief stroke denial stroke acceptance phase as they did once he was elected. And now in 2024, once the inevitability of Trump has sunk in, he realised he was here to stay for the meantime. Well, he just changed his tune and got on the train. Otherwise, he'd look silly sitting on the platform on his own while the train goes on past. During COVID, Bruce came out in ministry in late 2021 and forced all brethren to get vaccinated. He said verbatim that anyone who did not get vaccinated would be a loser and would become a test of fellowship, and governments would mandate the vaccine and you wouldn't be able to come to meetings or to the brethren's homes without it. Then each locality ran a spreadsheet that was followed up and updated by responsible brothers and sent to Sydney to track who wasn't vaccinated, and great pressure, socially and from admin, was brought to bear on people who did not get vaccinated. Some of these people had very good personal reason not to. Others were uncomfortable about taking an untested medical procedure they did not need, as they were already healthy and not in at-risk age brackets, and many others were totally happy to take the vaccine. What actually happened was governments did not mandate it in that way. In fact, once the COVID restrictions were lifted in most places, there was no requirement to be vaccinated or have vaccine passes to attend church or go to people's houses. Whilst the government COVID restrictions were in place, you could not go to church or other people's houses anyway. But the PBCC kept these internal requirements for about 2 years after and made people test for COVID and update spreadsheets every week so BDH didn't lose face. Because no word of these great men have ever fallen onto the ground. What a fuckwit. I have no issue if people choose to get vaccinated or not. That's their business. But this fat, unhealthy parasite forced everyone to get the jab based on a bogus reason. Then afterwards, it started seeping out all the business deals his boys are doing, supplying PPE and COVID shit to governments around the world at the same time. Meanwhile, this created terrible division within the PBCC and families. You had local priests ringing up people to inquire their vaccine status so they could update the spreadsheet for Sydney, and then harassing people not vaccinated. And if you weren't vaxxed, you couldn't come to a meeting, so anyone not comfortable with the vax couldn't come to the meetings, and they were choosing to stay away from the meetings, etc., etc. You get how the cycle goes. It's no business of any church leader what people decided about their personal health choices either way, except in this fucking diseased ecosystem. Now, if they can control what you do or don't put into your body in a way like that, anything else is a small potatoes compared to that. They can demand anything from you. I remember in the emergency UBT webinar once COVID hit, Gareth told us all that his father had said all the brethren should keep in their lanes and not get into PPE supply. Stay out of it. Now we know why. For fuck's sake. Then he told a strange story on the day the lockdown hit. Gareth was in a taxi going over Sydney Harbour Bridge to his home, wondering what they should do. So he rang Matt Locke from Boston and had a brainstorm session. Then the story jumped to them getting some contacts in China for this product. And they had a window of 2 or 3 days to check it was okay and get their offer in. Still didn't say what their product was or who the customer was. And the Chinese sent the data sheets via email. Gareth and Go printed them off in their office and ran them through Google Translate because they can't read Chinese. Gareth Hales said they looked reasonably okay, so we just thought we would run with it. Haha. And how smart are we? We turned it around in a few days, and it's a great opportunity. Lots of people at the time thought this was weird because BDH and UBT had spent the past 10 years dumping on China and saying brethren shouldn't be doing business there, and lots of brethren had gone down to considerable expense and time to try and reorganize supply lines away from China, which is almost impossible. And now the princeling is bragging about this. We find out a few years later about the PPE supply from Chinese factory using North Korean slave labour, and that the items of PPE were all faulty. I wonder if the stupid UK government knows this all arose out of Gareth and a few cowboys sitting around a table in Sydney one night using a faulty Google Translate version of a dishonest Chinese data sheet. Another example of BDH's crystal ball failing is when COVID first kicked off in 2020. In a meeting in Sydney about March/April, May time, he said that the UK government had said this COVID emergency was likely to last for 6 months, and the Australian government said it was likely to last for 12 months, and BDH said, well, he thought it would actually last for some time in between the two. This was taken as gospel by most peeps. Now, we all know it lasted a lot longer than that, so there's another example of him making shit up on the fly. He didn't have a clue. He just thought playing it safe and taking a figure between the two government experts would bring about right, and any discrepancy later could be explained as a rounding error. But as it turned out, 2+ years is a lot longer than 9 months. Then as COVID dragged on past this deadline, he would make comments in ministry about, yes, we don't know how long this will drag on for, can't see our way forward through this, etc. Basically, neither he nor the Universal Elderhood / Global Advisory Panel had any clue what they were talking about, so they stopped making as many predictions after this. BDH also initially said that COVID did not come from a lab leak. He thought it emerged from nature as God's judgment to chasten Western nations. And of course, years later, when it emerges, it likely did emerge from a lab leak, this prophetic utterance is quietly brushed under the carpet again, and very few people seem to learn the lesson. The stories are endless. It's beyond science fiction, some of the stuff.
So good. This writer writes so good. And I want to point out, like, we get in trouble for, like, swearing and being like, you know, if you swear, those inside are not going to listen to your podcast. I just want you to understand as we go through all these emails, insiders swear more than I do. And I swear a lot. So I just want to get you to...
Swearing.
I want to just reiterate again that these are emails from insiders, not bitter people who have left, not anybody that are on the outside. These are people coming. This is insiders that are writing to us. Yeah.
I wanted to point out one thing in there. I noticed the writer said that they kept an Excel spreadsheet of all the Plymouth Brethren members that got the vaccine. Yeah, so that's holding international medical records. And I would love to know the legal basis of how they do that, because now they're holding medical records from people in multiple different countries under different jurisdictions. Are those safeguarded? Who has access to these medical records? You're holding multiple people's medical records. Woo! That's scary.
Okay, so we're going to go on to the next email.
Hello, last email for today. I'm thinking about how to undo strong mental anchors in Peeb's minds that currently prevent them from looking honestly at situations for what they are and starting the process of disentangling. I like disentangling, but I like deconstructing too. In my own experience as an insider, I think one of the strongest things keeping people locked in, I'm talking about those who are still drinking a bit of Kool-Aid, is the mystique surrounding the Hales family and JSH and WBH. When BDH took over in 2002, he immediately went on a campaign to rehabilitate the image of the system from the 1960s and the reputations of JSH and WBH prior to this commercial system was hardly spoken about. And when it did come up, pretty much everyone said it was wrong. Then you would ask, but wasn't JSH involved in it? And they would say, yes, it's part of the mystery. WBH was hardly ever mentioned. Overnight for the next decade, we were regaled with all the stories about how amazing it was what JSH and WBH did with the system, how it was to elevate Brethren's circumstances, how nothing they could ever do failed. What a raging success they were, and by extension, BDH is trying to get us into the benefit of this, and we rejected JSH and BDH. Now we should hang our heads and submit to BDH, and everything he touches turns to gold. Given the intellectual impoverishment and lack of access to information among the Brethren in 2002, this worked a treat and really locked into most Brethren's minds the myth of Hales' infallibility and semi-divinity. It is this that is a very big mental block for a lot of Brethren who may see lots of wrong with the PBCC and feel uneasy, but then they come to, but BDH and JSH are right, and they are Paul, and everything they do works. And this stops the thought process. I personally know of more than one brother in the 50 to 60 age group who has confided to other brethren that they do not understand BDH and are uneasy with a lot of the things he says and does. They are horrified by his boys and think they are unrighteous at best, but they keep coming back to the fact that JSH was right and JSH always came back to the brethren even though they were wrong, so we have to just swallow our concerns and ignore them. I have often thought that if there was some way to really catalog and tell the stories of who exactly WBH and JSH were, and their histories and failures and sophistry they use in a way that strips them of their mystique, this will help remove this roadblock in a lot of people's minds who still think JSH was right. BDH has staked his entire legitimacy on carrying on JSH's work. So if this got eroded and shown for what it really was, all of a sudden the floodgates to talk about concerns about BDH open up. At the moment, he is still largely protected by the Hales mystique. Is there any way to get actual stories from people who grew up with JSH and WBH, who knew them in the early days, even in the 1950s? And here's some bullet points. What was the Hales family actually like? Were they always power-hungry narcissists? What drove them? What were WBH and JSH like when they were growing up? What were WBH and JSH like in the 1950s? Stories about WBH's failed business ventures, etc. I have heard that there was a streak of nuttiness in their family years back, but of course, there is no way to ask about this now. I know their father died when they were young. this would have an effect on them. Then I heard a story during the Great Depression. A beggar knocked on their door asking for food, and their mother, widowed by this time, gave him a loaf of bread, then shut the door and told the family that he was an unrighteous man, because if he was righteous, God wouldn't let him be a beggar. I remember thinking, what an incredibly cold, heartless Victorian mentality. But if this was the sort of stuff they grew up in, it would start to explain a lot of things about them. Another time, WBH was in New Zealand in the 1960s in Hastings area and bragging in the House that John thinks up all the ideas of what we are going to do, and I find the scriptures to support it. Ha ha ha. This is very different from the royal telephone everyone then assumed they were using. Often, if you were trying to understand someone, if you look at the world and the person's upbringing in their teens and 20s, you can get a good idea of how they will think and why they act the way they do now. This is a very interesting lens to view PEEB psychology through and see what methods are needed to try and change the minds of different age groups in the PBCC. If we divide recent PBCC history into the following decades and epochs, 1950s, the last of the normal times. This decade was the last somewhat normal decade among the Brethren, where they were essentially a simple, stale Christian denomination with some weird ideas, but things were largely tolerable. 1960s, false prophet,
Messianic
fervor. This decade was marked by huge upheaval, religious fervor, false prophets going around performing financial signs and wonders and introducing all sorts of novelties, global gaslighting, and starting to seal off from wider society. One-man ministry. The 1970s, Stalinism. This decade was marked by huge repression, callous, cruel treatment, intellectual and financial retardation of brethren, loss of freedoms, and edicts banning technology and things that were just insane. 1980s, Dark Ages. This decade was marked by continued repression, brutal existence, sealed off from society, retardation of the brethren in every way. The 1990s, treading water. This decade was marked by a softening of the brutality of the Symington area, but still no freedoms, still walled off from society. Social and general ignorance abounded. Homeschooling was introduced. Generally, the system was treading water and running up against a brick wall in its doctrine on technology. 2000s, perestroika. This decade was marked by BDH reconstructing the entire PB system. Novelties like approach to government kept people distracted. There was more freedoms. Life got better. People started getting more financial success and better quality of life. The review made people think at last reform had come. Introduction of technology, another miracle. BDH very much in control and setting the tone. 2010s, glasnost. Even more freedom. People losing some fears, increased connection with outside society through technology and business. People starting to get a bit more social and general knowledge of the wider world and how things work. BDH still very much in control. 2020s. Oh fuck. COVID hits and people have time to get off the treadmill and think. System starts losing its ability to control people like it used to. People experience the most freedom of their lives and now aren't scared to disregard PBC rules in their own lives. System has very little ability to enforce rules and implement punishments, so goes into quiet damage control. Increased public scrutiny and much more connection with wider society. PBCC reaches the start of the emperor has no clothes stage, as more and more people are quietly waking up and seeing the reality of what they are stuck inside and silently opting out where they can. To generalize, you can divide current PBC members into 6 age groups. Old guard generation, 70 to 90 year age group. These are the ones born in the 1930 and 1950 decades who were in their 20s during the 50s and 70s. Most of these are locked-in believers. These are the ones who would go back to weeknight interchange, meetings every night, and breaks every week if they could. They hearken for the old days because none of them had any lives outside of the PBC activities, so got bored at home all day and crave meetings and shit like that. This cohort is mostly confused. They talk longingly of the 60s and the system days and JT Jr.'s antics because they were young when they were in their 20s, and it was a very formative time, all the upheaval. They had no knowledge back then about narcissists, gaslighting, and psychological tricks, so they could not see when WBH, JSH, and JT Jr. used these same tricks on them. Instead, they see this as almost a divine appearing and great time in their lives they want to get back to. All of this age group totally believe the Aberdeen narrative and would not for a second consider any other accounts, because back in their day, they just accepted stuff and got on with it. Also, this generation is already in the departure lounge. So why are they going to rock the boat when they have only a few years left and can't look after themselves in the modern world? They won't change. Are a lost cause. Enforcer, Stockholm Syndrome generation, 50 to 60 year age group. These are the ones born in the 1960-1970 decades who were in their 20s during the 80s and 90s. In their teens and 20s, they lived under the worst excess of the Symington reign. Brutal, callous, cruel treatment, total ignorance of the outside world and how things work. Accepting fairy tales, stories based on the word of an elder who also didn't know what he was talking about, which leads to a very black and white, one-dimensional worldview in how they treat people and how they understand, see, and act in the world around them. They had drummed into them the Mog concept, and that asking a question is disloyalty, and Mog cannot fail, and any dissent was met with huge force back in their day. This generation is very compliant and scared of any edict or letter from the universal elderhood, even if it's nuts and no way to enforce it. Most of this generation would log in and listen to recordings of meetings every Thursday and Friday night. They are largely BDH's enforcers. Most local administrations will be made up of this age group because they will act under instructions even if their conscience tells them otherwise. And they feel they owe BDH for their current improved standard of living without realizing that the reason their standard of living improved so much in the 2000s was because the same people freeing them a little bit had kept them in chains for the previous decades. The teens, 20s and 30s of these people were shit. Nowadays, they get to have a big business, drink scotch, fly overseas on groups and for meetings, and to see some small part of the world. The PBCC now appears to them like a club with a ladder they can climb. To them, BDH has worked a miracle in their lives. They believe for the work's sake. This generation is mostly beyond hope, but not totally. More than a few of them are secretly concerned about some of the current happenings, but the myth of Hales' infallibility shuts their mind down every time they ask questions. If this myth could be dispensed with, a lot of these ones might be able to change. They are essentially a brutalized generation suffering from Stockholm Syndrome.
So true, hey?
Very true. The lost generation, 40-year age group. These are the ones born in the 1980s who were in their teens in the 1990s and 20s in the 2000s. They are the ones who did homeschooling in the 90s. They are the lost generation because they fall between the gaps of the current enforcers and the young Turks on UBT. These guys didn't suffer as much from the Symington reign of terror, but grew up in a cesspit of ignorance totally walled off from the world. There was still harsh punishments for them for any breaking of the rules, but they had no life, prospects, or goals to look forward to, and they were taken out of normal school and homeschooled, which anyone who went through homeschooling will tell you it was terrible. They called it Coro bondage after correspondence school. As a result of this, none of these did postgraduate studies and were too old too by the time the 2010s and UBT rolled around, so they tend to be working in middle management in businesses or maybe slaving away trying to run their own business or make ends meet with family demands and work in PBCC time demands and pulling their hair out. Because they have always been told Mog can't fail and Hales is infallible. They believe this outwardly. They are very time poor and don't know how to use the internet as much, so struggle to search things like Aberdeen or podcasts. However, this generation is very aware of the constant demand from UBT for money. Every time a high-up person or an RRT director has extramarital sex with their EA and gets off lightly, they are outraged. Yes, this does happen, and quite frequently too. Anytime there's another demand for time or money from the PBCC, they curse and grumble. In short, this generation is ripe for change. Once the Hales infallibility myth is dispelled for them, lots of these ones will jump. They have enough of their life ahead of them to make it worth it, and they don't have as much of the 1970s, 80s conditioning to totally lock their brains in. And they are already seriously chafing under the burden of the PBCC that no longer makes sense. The ones in this generation that are drinking the Kool-Aid tend to be desperately ambitious and crave inclusion in UBT and RRT, etc., and are quite thuggish with how they get to power as they lack social smarts. Glasnost generation, 30-year age group. These are the ones born in the 1990s who were teenagers in the 2000s and in their 20s in the 2010s. Called the Glasnost generation because they were in their 20s when Bruce was doing his attempt at openness. These ones have grown up with a lot more freedom, access to technology most of their lives. They have a lot more social radar and street smarts and know more about how the world works. They tend to outwardly conform to PBC rules, but in their private lives will do what they want. They are not scared of edicts or universal elderhood letters and will sometimes openly mock UBT or the hierarchy if it's safe enough to. As a result, because they have managed to set their lives up in a way shielded from the worst demands of the PBCC life, is somewhat comfortable, and they are focused on keeping it that way. If serious pressure was applied to these ones by the PBCC to conform, or else quite a few would resist it. This generation is online, knows how to use technology, and quite a few are aware of Get a Life podcast, and the unfolding PBCC scandals. Most would view old rules not having any meaning as time goes on and attempts by the PBCC to enforce old rules, like no hotels, no travel, etc. Make them raise their eyebrows and see the PBCC as being more irrelevant to their lives. They also have a lot of their lives ahead of them and have young families, and not all want to live inside some hermetically sealed business cult masquerading as a church for the benefit of the 1% at the top, but most don't know how to get out. There are ambitious young Turks in this generation who support the system because they want to be important on UBT or something, but none of them know anything about scripture, spirituality, or the Bible. It's all just Sydney, money, Sydney, UBT, Sydney, Scotch, charter flights, etc. Demystifying the Hales for this generation would be easier than the previous ones. Eyes open generation, 20-year age group. These are the ones born in the 2000s who were in their 20s in the 2020s. These are even more at home with technology, can access pretty much anything on the internet, know a lot about how the world works, popular culture, etc. And for them, all the MOG stuff and religion stuff means nothing. They are just here because they were born here, and dad and mom tells them that MOG is right, and so on. But they know the outside world is far bigger. They also sneakily take part in it. They have always had music, videos, phones, etc. They will be the easiest generation to demystify, the Hales too, because it is only a small anchor to them. They have lives ahead of them, interests they want to pursue, and they aren't interested in being a fat man with erectile dysfunction and high cholesterol sitting on the front row in a blue cardigan. Love that. Love that. I'm hoping the generation born in the 2020s will be the first free generation, but only time will tell.
There's a lot to unpack in that one. But it is exactly what he said, though. How he categorizes all the ages, it's really true. Like, it is so true.
I think that was really interesting to hear that perspective of the different age groups. Yeah. And I think the writer's absolutely right. The generation with the most access to information will be the one that's kind of believes it the least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That writer asked the question at the beginning about how do we get across what John Hales was like in his early days through the 60s. How can we debunk the people thinking that John Hales is all great and that? He wanted to know more about John Hales and through the 60s and that. When COVID first hit, we were all shutting our houses and listening to Zoom recordings, and we listened to a recording of John Hales and his heyday and when 1964, I think. John Hales, I worked at, he was about 42. We listened to him taking a reading, and I was just absolutely astounded at the way that John Hales, when he was a 42-year-old, the way he talked to older men. And
like are you saying he was disrespectful? Like he was rude in the way he
really
talked?
disrespectful to older men. He was only 42. And I relayed this to the priests when I was getting visited, and I said he was rude. I said my impression of John Hales was that he was rude. And they actually relayed this to Bruce Hales. And Bruce was really upset about it, that I said his father was rude. But just to answer that person's question in the letter, if they're listening to recordings of John Hales in the 60s, maybe they can hear for themselves how he spoke to people through the 60s. Or maybe, because that got back to Bruce, my impression was that he was rude. Maybe Bruce was a little bit careful not to let those recordings get through where he was rude to people, perhaps.
Yeah, exposing his real personality. I think that's what the writer kind of wants to see. And to answer that writer's question, like how can we demystify? I would say that there's two approaches that I've kind of seen. One, you can dive into the people that you're questioning, right? The leaders, and look at their writings and really go down that pathway to kind of deconstruct it in your mind and see if, they said this here and they said this here, so that contradicts, right? And that can help you demystify the Hales. The other way is to look at other different spiritual leaders, to look at other churches and even cults, and listen to some of those leaders. And then you will see these similarities, and that can help demystify, like, there's been other leaders that have said very, very similar stuff to their cults and their followings, right? So I would say that there's those two options. You can either dive into it, the actual stuff that person has said that you want to demystify, or you can look at other ones and realize the similarities and go, oh, wow, this is all just kind of the same.
Yeah, and if there's anybody that's out there that is wanting to either come on the podcast or write to us about stories that they have about John Hales or WBH, please send them into info.getalife@proton.me, and we can get them onto a podcast for those insiders that want that information.
We've said it before, what Lane was saying about researching other cult leaders, whatever. And the other thing you can also do, which is what I did when I was in there, is I researched good preachers out there. There's plenty of them on YouTube, and then they can see the difference between, John Hales and Bruce Hales and all the dribble they say in their preachings, and they can listen to good preachers, and that opened my eyes too, to listen to good preachers.
But also look at these recent podcasts and videos that have come out. We were saying earlier how much contradiction there is from what all of Bruce Hales' sons were saying about what they were allowed to do. I mean, I sat through that and I was just shaking my head at every turn, because I thought, we never were allowed to do that. We were never allowed to do that. We were never allowed to do that. We got, I know someone who got shut up for that. I know someone who got withdrawn from for that. It's a complete contradiction to, if what they're saying is true, then something's not stacking up.
Exactly. And we have to remind too everybody that all four Hales boys that are on there they're all older too, right? Like, we're not dealing with just 20-year-olds here, right? They were all around when we were around. When we weren't able to do what they're saying they're doing, we were not allowed to do that. That's the whole controversy there, is that if they're talking about things that they're doing in their childhood that we know. So Lane and I are Canada, Gilly is the UK, Peter is New Zealand. Here's like 3 different countries all saying that we were never allowed to do the things that these Hales boys are in a podcast saying they were allowed to do in their childhood. We were not allowed that. I've got priestly visits all the time. If I was caught talking to a worldly person on my paper route, I had a priestly visit that night. I got stopped on my paper route if I was caught talking to somebody. So, like, this is the whole hypocrisy of the palace trying to talk and relate to the peasants, because all of us peasants were never allowed to do this. And here, their first podcast is, you know, the king's sons coming out and letting everybody else inside there know of what the freedom they had. If they actually had it, or they're just saying that. But again, in either way, it's this complete hypocrisy over what the regular grassroots brethren were allowed to do versus those in the top of the hierarchy.
Yeah, absolutely. Gareth is only 10 years age difference to me, and I remember when I was a kid, we lived down there in the long driveway, and this kid down the street wanted to play with me after school, and I had to take my Matchbox cars down the end of our long driveway and play with them by the letterbox, because that was all I was allowed to do, and only for half an hour. It's very different to what those boys are relating, but we don't know how much of this is true and how much they're just trying to relay what's
exactly normal. Yeah. But to the insiders right now, it's hard for them to hear. Right? Like, and that's what I woke up to this morning, and my phone was just, this is ridiculous. Do you know how many priestly visits I got over this? Do you know how many times I wasn't allowed to do that? So either way, they're shooting themselves in the foot. If they're lying, they're shooting themselves in the foot. And if they're telling the truth, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Either way. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to some more emails here. So this came from an anonymous person inside. Around the time the Four Corners documentary went out. I have been in fellowship for 38 years. In those 38 years, I cannot remember a more dangerous time than the present. Let no one be fooled. Bruce D. Hales is a very desperate and dangerous individual. I would go so far as to replace the word individual with the word dictator. He will stop at nothing to achieve his end, and if that means death, so be it. No one gets in his way. He is God, and his word goes. Get up against him, and you'll be removed in an instant. No mercy, no time to say sorry, just silently removed through being shut up or withdrawn from. He will often offer amnesties to young people to get right and get in the clear. But let's be very clear. No such amnesty has ever existed. You confess your sins at your own peril. Confess your sins, and you're sure to be removed, shut up, withdrawn from, shunned. His lust for power and money has consumed him. The Bible, the Word of God, means nothing to him, and I will go as far as to say that there is no work of God in him whatsoever. He has a serious issue with alcohol addiction, and this comes through very clearly and very strongly. Constant crying, breaking down, sobbing during meetings and preachings indicates that addiction has completely consumed his way of life. He spends all week at home, except for coming out on a Saturday and a Sunday to try and convince his ever-dwindling flock. The Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is like a Venus flytrap. The outside appearance of the flower is beautiful beyond words. The nectar within is heavenly. You are charmed by the outstanding beauty of this flower and long for the nectar within. You instinctively enter as your curiosity is overcome. Upon doing so, the flower closes over you, trapping you and entombing you on the inside. There is no escape, no time for second thoughts. It's over. Those too weak to fight give up and are consumed. Some of those stronger members fight and escape, but not without loss, heartache for those they leave behind. Yeah, that's just heart-wrenching, hey? Yeah, says it just like it is.
To Bruce Hales, I'd like to relay a story that was told me from an insider in your church. Apologies for the long post, but you need to read it, Bruce. It concerns his marriage and how it was handled by your team of managers. This guy used to be devoutly committed to you and your father, taking everything you said seriously and applying it studiously. So when it came to marriage, he went by a comment made by your father, JSH, to another young guy who was interested in a girl he liked the look of. Your father thundered at him, "That's just lust." So this insider took that to heart, and remembering your father's words, he didn't dare approach any girls he liked the look of, because that was just lust, you see, and therefore a bad thing. But the local managers really wanted this bachelor off their books, probably to make their marriage KPIs look good. So they suggested to him that he marry this girl in another town. He told them he wasn't interested in her. Then came the pressure. Others spoke to him, seemingly randomly, and also made the same suggestion. Looking back, he can now see the blatant coordinated program that was going on behind the scenes. So under pressure, he agreed to phone her, but she also wasn't interested, so he left it and thought no more about it. Then came more pressure, both from responsible brothers in his city, and get this, he got a phone call from a front row brother in this girl's locality persuading him to write to her. He wasn't interested, but once again, being committed to you at that time, Bruce, not anymore though, he remembered some things that you often spouted out, Bruce. The brethren are always right. The brethren know what's best for you. Respect comes first, then love will follow later. So he thought, well, although I have no feelings for her, I guess I do respect her, so I'll just go in faith that love will follow. After all, the brethren are always right and know what's best for me. So he wrote to this girl, she agreed, and the marriage went ahead. And now, after many years, he still has no feelings for her. He's trapped in a loveless marriage where they're nothing more than roommates. He does his best to keep appearances up, but in reality, he's dead inside. He said to me, if this is love, I can't understand why people rave about it or why the poets write about it. He's a shell of his former self, just a husk. He used to be always smiling and laughing. Now it's rare to see him smile. He used to be popular socially, catching up with many after the church meetings. Now he just goes straight to his car. He doesn't know how it's all going to end, but it'll either end in him leaving because he can't stand the current dead situation, or he'll hang around living a dead life for the sake of his kids until he dies. But you'll say it was his decision and he needs to take responsibility for his own situation. Ah, yes, the usual response. Put someone under such pressure they cave in, but when it doesn't work out, you just wash your hands of it, saying it was their decision. Or you'll blame the Lord, like others have witnessed here. Do as you say, but if it doesn't work out, you say it's the Lord's testing you. What blasphemy. Needless to say, he's completely lost faith in you, Bruce. He only wishes he'd lost faith before he was married so he could escape without the complication of having a wife and kids. His committal to your word has basically screwed his life. You only get one life down here, Bruce. Don't keep ruining it for people. Leave them alone.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to just add into this that we heard on that latest podcast they did when they were asked if there was arranged marriages. And this is just one out of how many emails we get of hearing the stories of what an arranged marriage looks like. So maybe it's not an arranged marriage like you will see in other cultures, but this is still an arranged marriage. So maybe the king's sons didn't get an arranged marriage and they got to pick out of whatever flower they could get out of the garden. Not everybody gets that chance. They get told who to get married and are pressured into marrying these people. So to Lloyd Grimshaw, Bruce, and all the boys, this is what an arranged marriage is. This is what it looks like. Right here in this email is the product of an arranged marriage.
We often get asked as to whether marriages in the Plymouth Brethren are pre-arranged. And you've all said you're all married, all four of you, so how did you meet your wives?
Yeah, definitely not pre-arranged, Lloyd. I had a few short-lived romances in my early years, but I met Nerily, my wife, at Dubbo of all places, in year 10 where we did distance education.
He can also unarrange marriages too. So there's lots of examples of Bruce saying, no, they're not compatible. Like he thinks they're on different social levels or something, and he says no, they shouldn't get married. Yeah, and these people love each other. They want to get married. Bruce just slams it.
He did that to my brother, my older brother. I think she actually asked Bruce Hales if they get married. Basically said no, and so then my brother married her sister. Awkward, but you know what I mean? Like, it's so messed up. Like, yeah, he just flat out denied my brother marrying the first girl he liked, and so my brother's like, well, whatever. There's more in the family.
But coming back to Cheryl's point, like everyone knows the reality is that no marriage goes ahead without his approval.
Exactly. And that is, again, another form of arranged marriage because you're still giving it to somebody sitting in the throne. They get the power to say yes or no.
And there's no consistency. I remember my two brothers wrote to him about a similar sort of time. One got a response within couple of weeks. One had to wait 3-4 months before he got a response, and they both sent the same letters through the same channels.
I do know a couple that's out now that actually lied to their local priests and said they got permission because they wanted to get married, and they forced it. Like they got married and they did not have permission for Bruce Hales. But that's very rare, right? Like that's what we're saying. Like every single marriage is approved or denied. I would encourage them to, other couples that want to get married in there that do love each other, to lie about it if you need to.
Okay. And here's our next email.
Hi, Bruce. There's a popular rehab clinic up this part of the world. When I say popular, I mean popular with your PBCC members. There is literally a PBCC waiting list for poor members of your so-called church waiting to get treatment for their alcohol addiction. This waiting list is carefully managed to ensure no two members attend at the same time in case of trouble. Read that again, Bruce. A waiting list of PBCC members to attend alcohol rehab. Stand back and think about this. Why should a church that claims to be the best and only true church, a church apparently full of love and support, have such a massive issue of this nature? Could it be because alcohol consumption has been promoted from the very top, including yourself, for years? And you cannot deny this. I've had people who have been with you tell me of the way you push alcohol on to people. People who have done their very best to say, no thanks, I've had enough, but felt they had to oblige you because they fear your response if they dare dismay you. Or could it be because of the immense levels of stress that is pushed onto your members? Once again, pushed from the very top. Why should a so-called loving and supportive church have such obscene levels of stress? Why do people put up with this when it's literally ruining their lives, Bruce? I believe it's both reasons, which is absolutely appalling for a church. It also raises another question. Why can you yourself not live without alcohol? You preach about getting strength from God, etc. Why is God not giving you the strength to live without booze? Is it because you have an addiction yourself? Or is it because you're actually not any sort of man of God? In other words, maybe you're a fraud. We know you and your henchmen read these letters, so I look forward to your response via one of your church meetings.
He's a sassy writer, and I love it. And it's funny how well, it'll be interesting to see if alcoholism is brought up in any of their podcasts, right? Or if it's completely a subject that is put to the side and they don't even address it. And here's another email regarding alcohol. We get many emails regarding the alcohol consumption in there, so these are just a few of them. To whom it may concern, as a concerned member of the PBCC, I feel compelled to address a topic that has been weighing heavily on my mind, the escalating issue of alcohol and its destructive impact on our lives. One cannot ignore the fact that alcohol's influence stretches beyond the individual. Relationships, whether familial or friendly, often bear the brunt of its impact. The once joyful gatherings can quickly morph into tense environments marked by misunderstandings and emotionally charged outbursts. The veil of alcohol can cloud rational thinking, making conflicts harder to resolve and driving wedges between even the closest of families. At the heart of our community are families, the building blocks that hold our society together. Yet the influence of alcohol can weaken these bonds. The absence of a sober and attentive presence can leave families vulnerable. The family unit, so vital to the development of the next generation, can become fractured, leading to long-lasting scars on the emotional well-being of children and adults alike. We owe it to ourselves and to future generations to create an environment that nurtures healthy bodies, fosters resilient relationships, and upholds the sanctity of the family unit. Thank you for taking the time to read this letter, anonymous PBCC member. That actually is very sad too. Okay, here's the next one.
Hi, Bruce and co. There's a rumor doing the rounds about the Sunday breaks, organized lunch meals. The current post-COVID schedule has a break scheduled every 3 weeks. This means those needing to host a break only have to host every 4 to 6 months or so. However, there's a rumor that we'll be going back to the old schedule, breaks every week, meaning people have to host a break every 3 to 4 weeks. This is a lot more intense and expensive, which is the point of this message to you, Bruce. You need to know, Bruce, that there's a strong undercurrent of chats amongst the wives wondering how on earth they're going to afford this. A lot of the congregation are not multimillionaires like you and your mates. The cost of living has skyrocketed, and people are alarmed about this rumor and anxious about where the money is coming from to afford a more intense break schedule. The PEEB standard for hosting a break is very expensive. People cannot afford it, Bruce. If you were genuine, you would be feeling people's financial pain and putting a stop to this rumor. But I suspect that you and your mates are living in your own financial bubble and have no clue about the financial reality of how half your congregation live. I'm reaching out this way because there's no other way to communicate with you, Bruce. All your henchmen are also living in the same hyper-wealthy financial bubble as you are and would not take it seriously if I was to talk to them about this. They have no clue because they don't feel this financial pain. Please put a stop to this idea.
Yeah, and I think since we got this email, I do believe that this is actually going ahead. And it is. A lot of them are very, very stressed out about it. Going back to that podcast where you hear, the four boys talking about how, they got a small business here and they have a small business here. They're so humbly trying to relate to their peasants of like, they've struggled too. And, there's not just a big deal. We sold this business and, made a little bit of profit. Now I'm at home and I'm like it's just insane how they try and relate to the people that they know who are going to come back and say stuff like this.
I'm 47 years of age. I've been married for 27 years. Got a wife and 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. I've got a few small businesses that I work in and do a bit for the community, a bit for charity, look after dad and mum. And just a regular knockabout dad who's trying to get a few wins on the board.
Dean?
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. 43 years of age, been married for 21 years to my wife, Nerily. A grateful father of 2 daughters, 19 and 6. Family's at the centre of my life, and I guess my days are filled with sitting on a few boards, few business investments that I'm involved in, taking care of my elderly parents and get involved in a bit of charitable work.
Yeah, I'm Greg. I'm 40 years old. Been married for 15 years to my wife and have 2 children. I'm self-employed in the construction industry, so spend most of my days working in the business and spare time helping other small businesses around the country.
Thanks. Charles?
My name's Charles, 35 years of age, been married for about 12 years now, a wife and 3 children, a boy and 2 girls, 10, 7 and 4, keep me pretty busy. I'm the baby of the family, so the youngest of the 4 brothers here. I spent about 10 or 11 years in business with Gareth when we built up a business and sold it about 5 years ago. So the past 5 years I've been spending a lot more time with the family, less in business, and just try and do my bit in the community. I've got a couple of small shareholdings in smaller businesses and just try and sit on a few boards and try and help people out. And I obviously spend a lot of time with mum and dad as they get older and do what I can to support.
It's kind of funny.
It's so true too. Like I've heard from insiders just how the break standard has changed over the last 10, 15 years, right? How much money the wives have to spend on getting this food and the liquor and you can't just have a simple meal anymore. There's no barbecue hamburgers and some pop, right? These are high-end meals. So I totally hear what that writer is saying, like how financially that's going to be so difficult for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they'll be dictated to where they can buy it from as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so the next email is, Dear Bruce, someone stopped me to talk the other day. Turned out he was an out who remembered me. Their whole family was booted out wrongly many years ago. He said, when we were withdrawn from, it was like winning lotto. It was such a huge relief for them. They've all gone to have happy, successful lives, living as simple Christians. Isn't that ideal? He went on to tell me that I need to get out. It's no longer a Christian church in there. Seriously, you need to escape with your family if possible. Salvation is between you and God, not you and a man. What wise words. I had to agree with him. So Bruce, I just thought you'd like to know how your church appears to the outside world nowadays. Certainly it doesn't look like a Christian church anymore. Seeing as you go on about our testimony, maybe you need to look in the mirror. In terms of Christianity, you've wrecked the place. And this is another very interesting one. We often hear a lot about how they pray for the removal of opposers or pray for the death of opposers. And this one came into us telling us that there are some things that have been changed recently. Hello, I thought you'd find it of interest that the verbiage is changing recently in prayers for the removal of opposers and evil, wicked, apostate persons. Recently, BDH prayed something to the effect of, "Pray that the opposers may be brought to see the light." He also prayed that the judgment on opposers may be lessened, as in praying that God will lessen his judgment on the people. He has also brought this topic up in meeting, about praying for those against the position, that their hearts may be turned and they will see the truth. Bizarre, isn't it? Persons believe they're able to determine what God's judgment on someone else is, and know what punishment God has willed for them, and if we pray hard enough, God will change his mind? It is obviously quite a different tune than really not that long ago. It confirms to me that those who speak out, you are being heard. It is making a difference. It clearly puts the leader in a bind, having to scramble to change the narrative to not seem so heartless, or to portray something opposite of what's being spoken out about. All the while, still trying to maintain the fear of leaving and remaining members. We have been told we don't need to know what the attacks are, but we need to pray against them. So prayers still continue that the attacks against the position and attacks on our brother and his family will stop. It'll be interesting to see how prayers change across the globe now this example has been set for everyone to follow. Of course, BDH changing his tune on this and praying in this manner has produced an onslaught of people thinking even more highly of him and proclaiming how gracious and kind-hearted he is. How in the face of enemies, he only wants salvation for opposers. People think this is amazing and that it's truly an example of BDH Christ-like spirit shining through. So good news, maybe we're not all on the hellbound train anymore. Another interesting comment BDH made more recently, he said, "If you are having thoughts of leaving, get the idea out of your head. Get rid of those thoughts." With supporting comments of that nature, obviously. I'll have to wait to see the exact quotes are in a white book. We have had entire meetings on just those few remarks he made, which BDH knows whatever he says will be dwelt on and repeated over and over in every locality. Expedited brainwashing everywhere through intense fear indoctrination by responsible brothers. People are so paranoid about this looming threat of doubters and going down the drain. It's about all anyone can take a meeting on. Unfortunately for them, it is just further confirmation for those of us seeking to leave that we are making the right decision. Kind regards. Well, my response to this is you can't get any more black and white proof that they do pray for our removal in there. And if Bruce really wants to be compassionate and Christ-like, he would reach back out to us and we'd start solving the issues that we're bringing up here instead of him just telling people to not pray for the death of us anymore. So yeah, go ahead, Gilly, with the next email.
Hi, Bruce. I have an interesting story to tell you. Recently, I went overseas to visit suppliers. As suppliers often do, they asked me out to dinner. Usually I refuse, of course, but this time I accepted it. It was an enjoyable time. Everyone was respectful, mature, well-mannered, and courteous. They didn't seem at all evil, quite the opposite. Neither did I feel evil myself. It felt normal. But here's the interesting part. They obviously know I'm Peeb, and it turns out that they know many other Peebs in the same industry. You might find their comments on your separation doctrine interesting, as they proceeded to name some of the other Peebs they knew, saying, "Oh yes, X and Y were very strict about this, but A, B, and C were more relaxed. We've been out together a few times." And here's the kicker, Bruce. All these people they named are well known to you. You'd be on first name terms with them. And they're enjoying meals with worldlies. By the way, what a horrible derogatory name that is. Your facade is crumbling, Bruce. People are waking up and seeing through the BS, probably even daring to admit to themselves that it's no longer a Christian church, but indeed exhibits all the hallmarks of a cult. When's the next Aberdeen moment, Bruce? There'll be lots who want to take advantage of it to escape your clutches. Bring it on.
And I do think that that's what's happening right now. And many of them inside feel that. They feel that this Aberdeen moment is happening as they are trying this whole new PR campaign. Because it's really splitting them inside of who's really seeing through it. You can't sit there and listen to all these lies, go to meeting and try and act normal anymore. And that's really what a lot of these insiders are feeling, like this is what's going to create the next Aberdeen moment. Whether it does or not, I don't know.
There is a huge division, isn't there, between the hierarchy and between the if you like, the bottom of the pile. Because you know, they speak in that podcast about selling a business. That it means they can be at home. Well, how many other people in the Peebs can do that? they've sold a business for 300 million or whatever it was, that they can now be at home. The emails we saw earlier about, you know, the amount of money that's being technically enforced out of people, the standards of, you know, how much it costs to live that lifestyle, and it's just expected. You know, it's a massive division in between, and what this email says about what's, you know, the ones at the top of the tree, what they get away with. I can remember, I mean, I've been out 13 years, 14 years or whatever it is, and I can remember, you know, kids my age who were children of hierarchy, and they got away with murder that the rest of us wouldn't get away with. But because of who their parents were, and because their parents had got connections with Bruce Hales and had him to stay and all the rest of it, they were allowed to get away with everything. And it's just a complete and utter, you can see, like, and hopefully people see this from watching that podcast, the division between the top of the hierarchy and the bottom is just so far-fetched.
Yeah. I liked what the writer said there, though. He said it felt normal, right? Neither did I feel evil myself. And, you know, to those insiders listening, I want to encourage you to do that more, right? What you'll realize is you're not going to feel really guilty for going out and having a business meeting and eating lunch with, let's say, a potential client, right? And if you take the time to listen to them and their stories and their life, you'll actually go away feeling like you connected with a human instead of feeling, you know, any guilt. And that
Fear
is going to help you start to disentangle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you'll find those sales boys have done it too. they
absolutely.
The Daily Telegraph that they don't, but I don't believe that.
No.
Yeah, what this writer said about bring on the next Aberdeen, I've had insiders say to me that they would just love an Aberdeen to come. That's what they want. And that's what I wanted when I was in there, I just longed for an Aberdeen, and that's just what people they would just love an Aberdeen to come along. And so many would just walk. That would just make it so easy for them.
Yeah. And I honestly think that as the ATO stuff comes to a head, I mean, as much as Bruce is saying what he's saying in there, we all know that is a bunch of BS. It's not true. But I think there's a lot of elements at play that are happening right now that is creating this massive schism in there that literally it's going to split everything in half, the way that, you know, JT Jr. being found in bed with another woman split it in half. Next email.
Hi again, Bruce. I'd like to address something you mentioned in the recent ministry. It concerns the topic of when people do as you say, but it turns to shit. Then what? Your response? It's the Lord testing you. So let's get this straight. People ask you for advice. They obey your advice because you're the all-knowing Grand Abbot who is in touch with divine persons and therefore will only give right advice. Turns out the advice was garbage and things turned to shit. And you blame the Lord. It's the Lord's fault. So you have the ultimate get out of jail free card. Give advice, and when it goes bad, just blame the Lord. Sounds like blasphemy to me, don't you think? Look forward to hearing your next garbage response to this completely absurd and bullshit situation. People are seeing right through you, Bruce. Ciao.
And, you know, I like that one because he is the ultimate advice giver, right? In a cult like that, his advice on your life, on the most personal aspects of your life, he's giving advice on. And the guy's mentally challenged. Like, you know, like it's ridiculous to take his advice. But that's what we did in there, right? We took it as this, he was so intelligent, and he's really not.
In someone that has been there for the ups and downs and the in-betweens.
His kindness and compassion is off the charts, to be honest, and I think he's tried to teach us that, and you guys would know, but it doesn't matter who the individual is that he comes across, no matter what background, what circumstances they're found in, he seeks to understand their problems and to provide some solution. What would you...
Yeah, he's very kind, very caring. A lot of people don't understand him. There's a little bit of a mystery about him. But a lot of people would think that a church leader would be really aloof from the mainstream people, but he's not anything like that. He gets down to everyone's level, down to young people, middle-aged people, older people, caring for them, protecting them, setting them up. But if I was to describe my father, as Dean said, he's a good dad, a good friend, great personality, excellent sense of humour. But what attracts me to him is he doesn't really think anything of himself. He always takes low ground.
He's always there for the battler and the underdog and giving them an opportunity and trying to lift them up and giving everybody an opportunity to grow and be the best version of themselves.
He's always stuck up for the underdog, hasn't he? And that's how we've come up a bit. Like he could, as you say, he was visionary, he was a leader, he always had purpose and direction and focus, but then he could talk to all walks of life, couldn't he?
Just on that, it's one of the points in the podcast that boys made was about the dad always fighting for the underdog. Yeah. I saw written evidence after I left, and my dad contacted Bruce Hales to say what he should do about the situation and how he felt, he should be taking responsibility for the situation. Bruce Hales' advice to my dad was, when my dad was worried about me, Bruce Hales' advice to my dad was to worry about the kids, that you concentrate on the kids that are still inside. So where you fighting for the underdog there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's going after the one sheep that ran away, hey?
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Oh.
Holy shit.
Do you have a copy of that, Gilly, still?
I will get it. I saw that in writing myself, and you can say whatever you want. Read between the lines.
Yeah.
Forget the one that's gone.
Here's what was said in the email.
Dear Wesley, the advice from our beloved brother would be to concentrate on your 5 children who remain in the Holy Fellowship. With love in our Lord Jesus Christ.
Stay tuned for part 3 as we continue our emails from insiders and a special video at the end of that series for some comedic relief. How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. Or you can scan the QR code on your screen that takes you to our GoFundMe. Every donation helps keep this project alive. If you are in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. You can find all our Get a Life merchandise on our website at www.getalife.net. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.